In Miami with my beau.
Birdman.
Yeah.
And what he did, I mean, was that enough? Did he give you a gift or?
Yes, he gave me a car. He's a car guy.
Oh,
Yeah.
What kind of car?
He gave me the Tesla X.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because he gave you the Bentley truck.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
now the Tesla.
Yes.
When people hear the name Braxton, their minds instantly go to music. They think of harmony, of those voices that defined an era, of a family whose talent could silence a room and dominate a stage. But the truth behind the glitter and the applause has always been much heavier. Behind the music, behind the Grammys, behind the magazine covers and the sold-out arenas was another story running parallel, a story about money. Or more specifically, about the devastating lack of it. And no one bore that weight more brutally than Toni Braxton. To the world, she was a powerhouse. The sultry contralto who gave us Unbreak My Heart, a song that practically became a national anthem for heartbreak. She sold more than 70 million records. She performed across continents. She wore gowns that made her look untouchable. Yet behind closed doors, Toni wasn't untouchable at all. She was fragile, overwhelmed, and drowning under financial burdens that would have broken most people. What made it worse was that she carried those burdens not only for herself, but for an entire family that leaned so hard on her shoulders until her spine nearly snapped, standing nearby through it all. Watching every sacrifice and every late-night breakdown, was her baby sister Tamar Braxton. To this day Tamar insists that people don't truly understand the depth of Toni's suffering. That the public only saw the glamour and never saw the nights when the bills went unpaid, the mornings when their mother's car insurance had to be covered, or the weeks when the fridge was stocked because Toni scraped together the last of her money. Tamar makes no secret of it. Nobody but me helped Toni take care of our mother. Nobody. Toni paid for everything, the house, the bills, the insurance. And when it got too heavy, I stepped in. That statement, sharp and unapologetic, revealed more than gossip. It exposed a reality, that the family loyalty everyone assumed was equal, was anything but. Think about that dynamic. A Grammy-winning superstar, the voice of a generation, working herself to exhaustion just to pay her family's basic bills. Instead of enjoying the millions her talent had earned, Toni was nickel-and-dimed to death by contracts designed to bleed her dry. And while she fought to keep herself above water, her own family leaned harder and harder, trusting the bank of Toni to always stay open. Even when she was robbed blind by record labels. Even when she was left with less than $2,000 after generating hundreds of millions for her label. The requests never stopped. It's here that the cracks in the Braxton family empire began to show. Because if you rewind back to the 1990s, when Toni was unstoppable, you'll see exactly where this story roots itself. Her debut album went diamond. Secrets, her second album, gave us one of the most iconic ballads of all time. She was everywhere, magazine spreads, red carpets, primetime performances. Fans saw her as untouchable, immortal. But behind the curtain, behind the styled hair and custom gowns, the numbers told another story. Reports said Toni generated more than $170 million for Arista Records. Yet when the checks came, she had nothing to show for it. Every music video, every tour bus, every studio hour, every stylist, every private jet, all of it was charged back to her account. By the time the calculations were finished, Toni claimed she had less than $2,000 in royalties. Imagine that humiliation. A woman the world believed was rolling in riches couldn't even afford to buy her own mother a new car without sinking deeper into debt. Fans saw the lights, the glamour, the adoration. They didn't see the crushing weight of bills piling up, or the shame of creditors calling. They didn't see the long hours of a superstar weeping in silence because she was broke while the world thought she was dripping in diamonds. That contradiction wasn't just humiliating, it was dangerous. Because when your own family believes the hype, they keep asking for more.
Are you a car girl?
I'm becoming one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you're engaged.
I'm engaged. He did good, right?
You did well, right? Very well.
He did good.
But there's no date.
There's no date. We almost had a date. Well, we had 2 dates, but we were doing Braxton Family Values and we were going through a little drama. And
Braxton once admitted she told Toni, "When you make it, you can help us." And Toni, desperate to be everything to everyone, walked straight into that trap. She became the family's provider, the unspoken ATM, the glue that held the household together. But even the strongest glue cracks under enough pressure. By 1998, the facade shattered. Toni filed for bankruptcy, and the headlines were merciless. How could the decade's brightest star be broke? Fans whispered about overspending. Critics laughed at the idea of financial mismanagement. But they didn't know the truth. The contracts were written to drain her dry, the obligations were endless, and the family expectations were suffocating. Filing bankruptcy didn't just hit her finances. It branded her as irresponsible in the eyes of the world. It painted her as reckless, when in reality she was being robbed by an industry built on exploitation. Things spiraled further. Creditors accused her of fraud for transferring $53,000 to her then-husband Carrie Lewis, claiming she was hiding money. Courtrooms became battlegrounds. Headlines became weapons. For a woman whose voice had given joy to millions, the shame was unbearable. And through it all, Tamar was there, not asking for money, not demanding paychecks, but singing background vocals for free, helping their mother when others wouldn't, and quietly stepping in when even Toni couldn't. This is why Tamar speaks so loudly now. To her, the bankruptcy wasn't only about contracts. It was about betrayal. It was about watching her sister crumble while others pretended they didn't see. It was about family members who enjoyed the benefits of Toni's fame without carrying the weight that came with it. Tamar has never been shy about it. She feels sorry for Toni, not because she was careless, but because she was crushed by a system, both corporate and familial, that never gave her relief. And if the first bankruptcy was devastating, the second one years later was worse. Because by then, the toll wasn't just financial. It was physical. Lupus, microvascular angina, health conditions that drained Toni's body, forced her to cancel shows, and nearly took her life. Imagine working through fevers and chest pain, only to be told by insurers that your canceled Vegas residency wasn't covered, meaning you had to pay dancers, musicians, production crews, hotels, and flights out of your own pocket. One night you're a star on stage. The next, you're a debtor scrambling to explain to the IRS why you can't meet their deadlines, and still, the family obligations never stopped. The calls, the bills, the insurance payments, all of it still came to her. All of it still fell on her shoulders. By 2019, the IRS slapped a lien of more than $340,000 on her name. The state of California added another $116,000. Nearly $500,000 in unpaid taxes. The headlines screamed, broke again. The fans rolled their eyes. But Tamar? She knew better. She knew this wasn't recklessness. It was exhaustion. It was decades of giving and carrying and paying until there was nothing left to give. This is where the whispers began to shift into dangerous territory. Because while Toni's financial struggles became punchlines, the rumors began to question her choices in love. And the biggest whisper of them all was this: did Toni Braxton marry Birdman for love, or did she do it for survival? To outsiders, the pairing seemed strange. Toni was elegance personified, the R&B queen whose every move radiated class. Birdman was the tattooed hip-hop mogul, the man with a reputation for street business. But to those who knew them, the story wasn't so surprising. Birdman had been around for years. He showed up at baby showers, at family events, at concerts. He wasn't a stranger who appeared out of nowhere. He had been quietly orbiting her life, waiting in the shadows. And when lupus threatened to break her down completely, he was there. For the first time in decades, Toni wasn't the one carrying someone else. With Birdman, she could breathe. She could take off the wig, wear sweats, and still be adored. He asked her daily, "Are you good? Are you okay?" And when she lied, he pushed past it. For a woman who had spent her entire adult life pretending she was fine while she drowned, that kind of care felt like oxygen. But if Birdman represented love and relief, he also represented something else: security. And that's where the whispers started to bite. Because fans weren't sure whether they were watching a romance or a transaction. And that uncertainty became the stage for the next chapter of Toni's complicated story. When Birdman officially stepped into the public picture with Toni Braxton, people didn't know what to make of it. To many, they seemed like opposites who didn't belong in the same sentence. She was the epitome of class, a woman who had carried herself through decades of hardship with an elegance that never cracked on camera. He was the cash money mogul, known for tattoos that told their own story, for street-smart business moves, and for the rough edges that came with surviving in hip-hop's cutthroat world. But for those close to them, the connection wasn't random. It had been building quietly for nearly 2 decades. Birdman was always there, in the background at family celebrations, at rehearsals, at shows, in hospital visits when lupus left Toni weak. He wasn't some stranger sweeping her off her feet. He was the constant, the one who showed up when others disappeared. For the first time in years, Toni wasn't the one doing all the carrying. With Birdman, she found someone who actually carried her. He would check in constantly, "You good? You okay?" And when she brushed it off with a smile, the same fake smile she had used on fans and family for years, he called her out. That kind of attention, after decades of hiding her pain, felt like a revolution. It wasn't about money in those private moments. It was about a woman finally being seen not as a bank account or a superstar, but as a human being who was exhausted, but nothing in the Braxton world is ever simple. The moment their relationship became public, the chatter began. Fans rolled their eyes when Birdman gifted Toni a luxury Bentley truck and called her his soldier, his everything. People muttered that the relationship felt transactional. That maybe Toni, beaten down by bankruptcies and IRS liens, saw Birdman as financial safety. That maybe Birdman, with his own empire and reputation, saw Toni as a way to soften his image. The whispers got louder when Toni flashed her diamond engagement ring on Instagram, smiling like a woman finally living her fairy tale. To her fans, it was a love story that seemed almost too good to be true. To Tamar Braxton, it looked like the first time her sister wasn't walking alone. Plans for a wedding became the next obsession. Toni spoke of wanting a Gatsby-themed celebration, dripping in glamour, with chandeliers, champagne towers, and a guest list fit for royalty. For a while, it felt like a storybook ending was on the horizon. But the Braxton family never found peace in celebrations. As soon as the word wedding surfaced, family tensions resurfaced too. Old grudges between sisters flared up. Toni admitted on camera that she hoped the wedding would bring her siblings together, but instead, it pushed them further apart. Then came the infamous ring scandal. $1 million engagement ring, allegedly left in checked luggage during a flight, disappeared. Just like that, the symbol of Toni's fairy tale was gone. Some fans believed it was exactly what it looked like, a careless accident that turned into tragedy. But others whispered something darker. Was the ring really lost? Or was it sold to cover debts? Was the drama exaggerated for television? The speculation cut deep, because for years people had questioned whether Toni's choices were about love or about survival. A missing ring only fed the narrative that money always hovered like a shadow over her relationships, and then, without warning, the cracks split open. Birdman deleted every photo of Toni from his Instagram. He posted the cryptic words, "It's over." Toni responded with her own Instagram post. A picture in a stunning red gown with the caption, "Starting a new chapter isn't always an easy choice, but always choose to be chosen." The world read it as closure. As goodbye. For fans, it was another chapter in a tragic pattern, Toni giving her heart, only to watch it crumble, but then came the twist no one could have predicted. Court documents revealed that on August 8, 2024, Toni Braxton and Birdman quietly married. No Gatsby celebration. No chandeliers. Just a legal union, away from the cameras. And 2 days later, on August 10, they separated. By August 22, Toni filed for divorce, calling the marriage irretrievably broken. 2 days. That was the length of her marriage. Pause and think about that. After decades of friendship, after an engagement that stretched for years, after public declarations of love and private moments of care, the marriage lasted only 2 days. Does that sound like romance? Or does it sound like desperation colliding with reality? Fans were divided. Some said it was proof the marriage was never about love, that it was purely a survival tactic. Others said it was proof that Toni, exhausted from carrying the world, couldn't handle the pressure of being tied to someone so different, so public, so intense. What made it even more complicated was Tamar's role in the story. Tamar never accused her sister of marrying for money, but her words carried weight. She told the world how sorry she felt for Toni. She reminded fans that while everyone mocked the bankruptcies, they forgot the details, the nights when Toni had to pay the dancers and musicians from her own pocket even after shows were cancelled. The endless bills, the unpaid taxes, the pressure of carrying her siblings and her mother on her back. Tamar didn't have to say the words, she married to survive. Her subtle truths painted the picture clearly enough, and just when fans thought they had their answer, another twist hit. In January 2025, just months after declaring the marriage broken beyond repair, Toni quietly dismissed the divorce petition. Birdman agreed. Which meant that legally, on paper, they may still be husband and wife. No big announcements. No press releases. Just silence. And silence, in a story already filled with whispers, only made the speculation louder. Was the dismissal a sign of reconciliation? Or was it strategy, a move to protect assets, to keep another public scandal from spiraling? No one knew for sure. What they did know was that nothing in Toni Braxton's life had ever been straightforward. From the first exploitative contracts that stole her royalties, to the bankruptcies that branded her as reckless, to the IRS liens that dragged her through headlines, her story had always blurred the line between love and survival. This marriage, sudden, brief, confusing, was just another chapter in that same blurred reality. The saddest part of all was how familiar the cycle felt. Every time Toni tried to build something for herself, it crumbled under weight she didn't deserve. When she carried her family, she was drained. When she fell in love, it was questioned. When she leaned on someone else, it was mocked as a scheme. And through it all, Tamar stood on the sidelines, defending her sister's dignity while reminding the world of the truth no one wanted to admit. Toni Braxton wasn't careless. She was exhausted. She wasn't reckless. She was robbed. By the time fans learned of the secret two-day marriage, sympathy and suspicion clashed in equal measure. Was it a tragic love story doomed from the start? Or was it a survival decision that backfired almost instantly? Nobody outside Toni and Birdman could answer that. But what could not be denied was the reality Tamar had pointed to all along. Her sister had carried a weight heavier than any diamond ring. Heavier than any stage performance, heavier than any family obligation. And maybe, just maybe, this strange, short marriage was never about Birdman at all. Maybe it was about a woman who had spent her entire life surviving, still trying to find a way to breathe. By the time the news broke that Toni Braxton had dismissed the divorce petition against Birdman, the confusion reached an entirely new level. Fans were already struggling to understand how a marriage could end in just 2 days, but now they were forced to question if it had really ended at all. On paper, legally, Toni and Birdman may still be husband and wife. To some, this was evidence of reconciliation, proof that love had quietly survived the storm. To others, it looked like strategy, a calculated move to protect assets, to shield Toni from more public humiliation, to keep the whispers at bay. But if there's one thing the Braxton family has taught the world, it's that nothing is ever simple. And silence often says more than words. The dismissed divorce petition sent fans down a rabbit hole of speculation. Was this proof of love, or proof of survival? People dissected every Instagram post, every public sighting, every interview. When Toni appeared smiling with her sisters, some took it as a sign she was moving on. When Birdman stayed quiet, others claimed it was proof they were secretly still together. The uncertainty became its own kind of performance, with the public as the audience and the Braxtons once again at the center of a show no one could turn away from. But while the world debated love versus money, Tamar Braxton made sure the conversation didn't forget the bigger picture. Time and again, she reminded people of what they had ignored for years. She talked about how Toni had carried their mother's bills, how she had covered car insurance payments, how she had supported sisters who never once considered how much it was draining her. She talked about the nights when Toni came home from rehearsals, her body screaming in pain from lupus, but still writing checks to cover everyone else. She talked about singing background vocals for free while others demanded salaries, because she couldn't stand to see her sister stand alone. These weren't rumors. They weren't gossip. They were facts from someone who had lived it. And that is why Tamar's voice cut deeper than tabloids. Because while fans speculated about a missing engagement ring or a 2-day marriage, Tamar was pointing at the core truth. Her sister's life had never been as glamorous as it looked. The mystery of the marriage itself only grew. Some fans said dismissing the divorce was simply paperwork, nothing more. Others argued that maybe Toni never stopped loving Birdman, that the marriage collapse had been more about outside pressure than what was happening between them. Still others insisted it was all strategy, that staying legally tied to a man with Birdman's financial power was a form of protection for a woman whose career had left her battered. No one could agree, and the silence from Toni only fueled the fire. But if you pull back from the marriage for a moment and look at the full timeline of her life, the story almost tells itself. 2 massive bankruptcies that left her reputation in shreds. Millions lost to record labels that exploited her talent. IRS liens that dragged her through headlines. Health battles that nearly killed her, forcing her to cancel residencies that should have been her financial safety net. A $1 million engagement ring that mysteriously vanished. And then, a marriage that lasted 2 days before dissolving into secrecy. Each chapter on its own might seem like bad luck. But strung together, they paint the picture of survival instincts. Toni wasn't reckless, she was surviving. She wasn't irresponsible, she was trying to stay afloat in a system that seemed determined to drown her. That's why fans keep circling back to the same question. Did she marry Birdman for love? Or did she marry him to survive? And maybe the answer is both. Maybe it was love that grew out of survival, or survival that disguised itself as love. Maybe Toni herself doesn't even know where one ends and the other begins. Because when you've spent decades carrying the world on your shoulders, sometimes the line between romance and relief blurs until it disappears. The saddest part is that no matter what choices Toni made, she was judged. When she carried her family, people called her foolish for letting them drain her. When she filed for bankruptcy, people laughed at her for being broke. When she married Birdman, people accused her of scheming. Even when she leaned on Tamar, the one sibling who never asked for money, the whispers still didn't stop. For Toni, it seemed there was no winning. And for Tamar, watching her sister endure that constant judgment became its own kind of torment. To this day, Tamar insists her sister deserves grace. She doesn't frame Toni as a victim, but as a survivor who was robbed by an industry and then robbed again by family expectations. She knows what it cost Toni to stand on stage night after night, pretending to be untouchable while creditors called in the background. She knows the humiliation of having to explain bankruptcies the public mocked but never understood. And she knows that the 2-day marriage to Birdman, whether about love or survival, was just another chapter in a lifetime of choices Toni never should have been forced to make. The whispers, of course, have never stopped. Some fans claim the ring scandal proves it was never real love. Others argue that the dismissed divorce proves it was. The truth is, only Toni and Birdman know for sure. But what everyone else can agree on is this: Tamar's revelations have forever changed how people see her sister's story. Without Tamar, fans might still believe the bankruptcies were carelessness, the marriage a joke, the financial chaos proof of irresponsibility. With Tamar's voice, people see the human cost. They see the nights of sacrifice, the endless bills, the weight that nearly broke her. They see a woman who gave everything, her voice, her health, her money, and got crumbs in return, and that is why this story resonates so deeply. Because in the end, it isn't just about a missing ring, a 2-day marriage, or even a superstar's bankruptcies. It's about survival. It's about the price of fame, the burden of family, the cruelty of an industry that takes and takes until nothing is left. It's about a woman who should have been celebrated as royalty but was instead forced to fight for scraps. And it's about a sister who refused to let the world forget that truth.so. When people ask if Toni Braxton married Birdman for love or money, maybe they're asking the wrong question. Maybe the real question is this: how many choices does a woman truly have when survival is the only option left on the table? Because love fades, money disappears, contracts run out, and family loyalty bends under pressure. But survival is forever. And in the Braxton family, survival has always come at the heaviest cost.